I was kind of a child prodigy, if you will. I started performing when I was 8 years old. By the time I was 10, I was making money with my magic shows. And by the time I was 13 or 14, I was making more money than my parents. So I think that I had an idea, for me personally anyway, I had an idea very early on that I wasn't like everybody else.
What if you could learn directly from the people who've already built what you're chasing? Welcome to Ingleside Reviews, Innovators Unveiled, where founders, creators, and leaders reveal the real strategies behind building brands that last. This is your masterclass in real-world innovation. And now your host, A.D. Edwards.
On this episode of Ingleside Reviews Innovators Unveiled, we're talking about the future of storytelling, innovation, and what it means to stay human in a world that's being reshaped by AI. My guests are Kerri, Zane, and Steven Diamond, two creative forces bringing together media, technology, and a vision in a powerful way. This is a conversation about reinvention, creativity, and where storytelling goes next. Please tune in, subscribe, follow, and rate the show. Ingleside Reviews Innovators Unveiled is available on Bravehearts TV, on Roku, and Amazon Fire TV, YouTube, and all major podcast platforms. Now let's get started. Kerri, Steven, welcome to the show.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Now you all have different backgrounds, and we're going to talk about the origin stories in a few minutes. But what you all are doing with AI is amazing. But for someone that may be hearing your names for the first time, what's the deeper human conversation behind the work that the two of you are doing right now?
Kerri, go for
Well,
it.
I think for me, it is that we are passionate storytellers and creators.
For sure. I think on my side of the fence, which is the AI side, the way we kind of work, Kerri handles the Hollywood side of things, storytelling and that part of it, and then I do the AI and the technical side of things. And so I think for me, it is also the storytelling. But I think that what is most fascinating about where we are going in all of this is that only just a year ago, people thought storytelling was dead. And now it is the center of everything that is happening, whether you're talking about movies, corporate brand films, even marketing videos are all about storytelling.
So before you all started the company, before you had the titles, the credentials, and the companies that you worked for, what made each of you fall in love with story? Well, I'll go with you, Kerri, first, because you're the storyteller of the two.
Okay. So honestly, I believe that it is in our human DNA. We are all storytellers. And if you think about it, people can tell story through numbers, they can tell stories through painting, or they can tell stories through words. And it's as old as time. So my method is words. And I have told people very often that I paint stories with words.
So you paint these stories with words, but then Steven, you have to translate it basically, right?
Yeah.
So how did you start getting into your realm of what you do of translating and bringing these stories to vision?
It's a great question. Kerri and I are two sides of the same coin. And so my side of the fence has been translating those stories into a visual format that people can really digest. And I think that what I have focused on to improve storytelling, because it's been a very important part of my process to elevate what we're doing. I think that Lumovex needs to uh, elevate the quality of the AI that we're producing. I hear all the time when I talk to people out in the public, they ask me things like, they say, I see AI videos, but the characters don't look real. Or what I hear a lot is there's no soul in their eyes. When you look into their eyes, there's no soul. So I really feel like that we have done a spectacular job at adding a soul to our characters and ensuring that when you are watching one of our stories, that you really resonate on a human level and you connect with that character on a much deeper level, you know. And I could go down the rabbit hole about what makes a character come to life in an AI format. But I think that when you're watching a video and you lose track of the fact that you're watching something that is created with AI, that's a success for us. That's how we define
Definitely.
that's how we define its success, because if we can take you out of your brain thinking, "Oh, I'm watching something that was created with AI," because AI is just the tool. You know, it's no different than Kerri taking a camera and going and filming a traditional movie. It's the same thing. We're just instead of a camera, we're using a set of software, that a software stack that allows us to create the exact same thing. And what we're learning in this process is how to bring that life to the characters. And so it's fascinating, and I think that it's only going to get better.
So, Carrie, when you look back at your earliest years in television, what did that younger version of you understand about audiences and many things that executives might miss? Because tell the audience what you've done in television first off.
Okay. Well, short story. It's a long story, but a short story is I've been in television for 30 years. I have produced just about every kind of content that you can imagine, except for a game show. I won an Emmy for a school break that I produced in the 90s. And, just sort of launched from there. A lot of reality television. But no matter what you do in television, you are always telling stories. And I love this question because it does take me back to my very first TV show, which was called Name Your Adventure. And Mario Lopez was the host of my show, and it was on Saturday morning, and we made kids' dreams come true.
So, if
And
you're talking 30 years ago, Mario Lopez had just finished Saved by the Bell or something, right?
we were actually on at the same time. So
Okay.
our show was the lead-in to Saved by the Bell. He was 18 years old, and now he's a grown-up with kids.
Right, right, right.
Imagine. I was 18 then too. No, just kidding. Kids are great.
I cut you off. So tell us about this. You were reminiscing.
Yeah, so I think one of it was like it was a seminal moment for me in terms of who I am and how I articulated stories moving forward. So as I said, we made kids' dreams come true, and one of the episodes, God rest her soul, was with FloJo. And she was teaching someone who, how to be a better runner, how to be a better athlete. And I remember we were talking about how we wanted to shoot the episode. And I said to my cameraman, I want to train a camera on her parents. And they're like,
Hmm.
why? Nothing's happening there. And I'm like, just trust me, train the
Uh-huh.
camera on the parents. And we got this beautiful emotional moment where her parents were really brought to tears watching their child excel and work through her program with FloJo. And that's the essence of it, because when you tell stories, you want to touch somebody in some way. You want to get that emotional beat. And so I've always, in every story that I do, I always look for that heart moment.
Wow. So let me ask you this, because when people are entrepreneurs, most entrepreneurs do things that's unorthodox. We've even heard people say, you see the vision, so others may not understand it. So here you are taking a chance, you're training on the parents, but this is something that's not done before. Were you kind of afraid to do that at first and you just went with it? What was the emotions behind doing something unique that early in your career?
I had very good mentors who helped me understand what that aspect of storytelling. And I think also at that time I was a young parent, so I sort of know and it's different. And I don't think that people can explain what that connection is to your children until you
Hmm.
have children. And no offense,
Yes.
even your dog is not your child. Um, they are different. You can love your dog, but you can't love I I'm sorry.
It's a little bit different.
It's just a little different.
It's
So
still love, but it's a little
I'm a
bit
little
different kind of love.
obsessed with my
yeah,
Rottweiler.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you knew from being a new parent or parent at the time that there was something there that most shows would miss. And so that's unique, and you went for it. Now, I have a similar question for you, Steven, because you have a background. I want the audience to know your background as well. But I want to eventually know, um, first tell us, I got the question ready for you, but tell us your background so they'll know.
Okay, so I spent basically 30 years of my life as a professional magician doing magic shows, touring all over the world. I performed in over 100 countries, did over 10,000 live shows in my career in front of millions of people. And that's kind of how I grew up. There's a three-part documentary on Netflix about my life called Tiger King, the Doc Antle Story, and it covers the first 16 years of my career when I partnered with the guy who had the Tigers. I had the magic show. I was performing a local show, charity show in my neighborhood, and the curtain went up one day, and sitting in the front row, there he was. And he came backstage and said, "Hey, I've got Tigers. You've got a magic show. We should partner up." We did. And that took me all over the world for a very long time. And then after my career ended in 2016, I stopped touring and I started producing. And I did a lot of residencies here in Las Vegas. So I did Britney Spears residency, which was the first one that I did, and then I did a bunch of others, Cher, Celine Dion, the list goes on. So I've worked with a lot of A-list type performers, and I did producing residencies, touring shows, all that kind of stuff until the pandemic hit. And right before the pandemic, I had opened a marketing agency and had started marketing different projects. People were coming to me and saying, "Hey, Steven, could you help me with this? Could you create a methodology for doing this or whatever?" And so I started doing that, and that turned into my marketing agency, which all these years later has now morphed into what Kerri and I are doing. And it is now, Lumovex.com. And I think that all of the experience that I've had in my career, the thousands of shows I've done in arenas all over the world, and then working with all of these high profile artists and celebrities and all of those kind of things have really served as boot camp for me that
Mhm.
taught me everything that I need to know about storytelling, about communicating with an audience, how to use the medium of television as a conduit between you and the viewer. All of those things I never would have understood the way and to the level that I understand them had I not stood on that stage all those years touring around the world.
So thanks for that answer about your background, because now the audience will understand my question. At what point, and this is for you too, Kerri, but Steven, at what point did you know that your way of earning a living would not be conventional?
Well, I mean, I think that, at 16 years old, I was swimming in a swimming pool with a 400-pound tiger. So I think that that would probably be a pretty good indication that things are not going as they would for everybody else. Um, so I was kind of a child prodigy, if you will. I started performing when I was 8 years old. By the time I was 10, I was making money with my magic shows, and by the time I was 13 or 14, I was making more money than my parents. So I think that I had an idea, for me personally anyway, I had an idea very early on that I wasn't like everybody else. I just
Mhm.
thought differently. And it all is because of my father. My father instilled in me at a very, very early age, when I was 5 or 6, he taught me that I could do anything that I believed that I could do. And if I
Mhm.
just believed it, I could do it. And that's resonated with me my entire life, and it's just stayed with me throughout the years.
That's awesome. What about you, Kerri?
It's funny. I don't have a sexy story like that. I wasn't swimming with confidence. That was
So you knew you wanted to be in.
else. But I think it's just the opposite because I remember I used to make up stories all the time. And my mother would say to me, and she was from Boston, so forgive me because I fall into my mom, but she's like, Kerri, I don't know where it comes from. You know, like I don't either. She's like, your imagination is wild, but your punctuation really sucks. So yeah, so she would fix my stories, but I that's where I lived. I lived in my head and I think I really liked it there. I used to send my friends home. I didn't want to play with them. I just wanted to like make up stories. So I don't know.
So that's good. We know, like, we know the origin behind you guys individually, but let's talk about the trials and the transformations that you guys went through. And what did the younger version of each of you misunderstand about success? Now, Stephen, here you are making more money than your parents at 10, or was that 13?
Yeah, I was a
But
little
it,
12, 13, 14 years old. I started doing
what did
corporate shows, and that's when the money really started flowing.
what did you how did you measure success then versus now?
I had no idea what I it was blind ignorance, my friend. I'll tell you, there is so much to be said. I could write a whole book about blind ignorance and how far it will take you. Because if I really had known what I was doing, I probably wouldn't have done it. And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs around the world that could say that, you know,
Many say that. Many say
many
that.
say that because I really just don't think if I had any inkling of a clue of what I was getting myself into that early on, would I have done it? The first thing that you need to know is I at like 15 years old signed up to be in a cult and I didn't realize it. I didn't know that I was partnering myself with a cult leader. I didn't know that, and this is the story that we tell on Netflix. But I had no idea that the person I was partnering myself with was forming this cult, and I was one of the original members. Had no idea.
You're
So
one of the founders of a
yeah, and
cult.
that's correct. He was, you know, he used the animals as a way to attract people, and then once they came into the fold, he transformed them into basically indentured servitude. You know, they were slaves, and we would all work and care for the animals. I mean, when you're talking about exotic animals like tigers, you're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to, you know, shovel poop and clean the cages and take care of the animals and stuff like that. You don't think about those things. When you see me on stage for 90 minutes, you know, the glitz and the glamour, the shiny costumes and the sets and the lights and all that sort of stuff, you don't realize that I've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning shoveling cat poop. But that's the reality. And so to answer your question, I don't think I would have gone down that path had I really known. But I will tell you that the moment that changed everything for me was in 2000, or I'm sorry, in 1992, I think it was. It was about 92. I got an opportunity to be a character on a children's television show in South America, and it was called Nubeluz. And I was the magician, and I had come on the show originally just as a guest. And so when I jumped onto the show and saw the world of television for the very first time, I knew what I was doing instinctively. I just understood the medium of TV, and I connected really, really well with the audience. And the producers realized this, and so they offered me a contract that actually separated me from my partner, and they only wanted me. They weren't interested in the animals at all, which was the first time that had happened in my career. So I stayed in South America and did that TV show for 6 years. And I will tell you that that is when everything changed for me. Because for the very first moment, I was standing on my own 2 feet. I was a young guy. I was like 18, 19 years old at the time. I was making more money than I had ever dreamed of making ever in my career. And for the very first time, I was getting to keep it. So
Hmm.
I think that's when I realized that I had the opportunity to now build and shape what would eventually become, my journey.
So when it comes to success, I'm quite sure it has changed, Kerri, since you first started in the business. What are the differences?
Um, well, I think the mission to success is always the same, right? It's whatever you set your levels at. You know, I grew up believing that I could do anything, and that if I really wanted it, I could make it happen.
Hmm.
And that's never changed for me, as Steven knows. He's experienced that now. It's like I know this leads into other topics, but I never let people say no to me. I just never did. And it worked to my advantage in the television business because you get more no's
Still
than you get
doesn't.
yes. Um, so it is that drive to succeed, and I think it was innate in me, but I think it's a muscle that anyone can build, and you got to have the fortitude. I think now in the times that we're living in, no matter if you're working in television or any other business, it is so hard to shine and stand out. So you have to do everything that you can to make a statement, be different, be an outlier. Don't let people say no to you. How do you get to the yes? You got to
Hmm.
got to use your head.
Right, right.
I
Yeah.
feel like that
So,
is a core characteristic of being an entrepreneur. I
Mhm.
don't feel like you will be successful as an entrepreneur unless you have the exact mindset that Kerri was just describing. I just feel like that people, and I see it all the time. I have a friend who owned a candy store here in Las Vegas, and she had a brilliant store, and it was beautiful, but she personally had the wrong mindset, and the
Mhm.
business didn't survive. And she came back to me years later and sat down with me over dinner, and she was like, "Tell me what happened." And I could see it from a perspective that she couldn't, and I told her, I said, "The reason was you were so consumed by fear of failure that that is what you manifested," you know? A and had she just had that shift that Carrie's talking about, if she just had adopted that in her life, her entire business would have been, hugely successful.
a friend of mine asked me after finished season one. He says, "You've done over 22 interviews of entrepreneurs. What can you tell me something? So tell me something that you learned." I said two things that they all have in common. They don't view mistakes as failures. They view them as learning opportunities, and they don't stop. They don't believe in stopping. They keep going. They're persistent and they're consistent with persistence. So I definitely agree. Yeah, no, learning to hear no is a good thing for an entrepreneur because that's going to be what would I say? That's the barometer to measure if you're going to be tough enough to fulfill what you want to fulfill or you're going to quit.
And
So
I
I definitely agree
back
with you.
also to blind ignorance, because you need a little bit of that blind ignorance to help
Hmm.
take you to the next step. If we know everything, when I'm doing speaking engagements, I always talk about this because I think it is such an important part of the process. If we had all the answers, we would never achieve anything,
Right.
because it is that blind ignorance. It's not knowing what you don't know that keeps you moving forward and gives you the confidence to be able to
Hmm.
believe that you can do it. You talk about being
Agreed.
unstoppable, and you talk about not stopping. Well, for me as an entertainer, and even as a very young entertainer, when I was knocking, back in those days, we didn't have the internet and you had to physically take your VHS tapes. Does anybody remember what that is? But you had to take your VHS tape with your promotional reel. that you had had someone at a TV station edit on a deck that was this big, a beta deck, and you had to take that VHS tape and you had to go knock on every door and hand them that tape and get them to watch it in order to
Right.
get booked. So I learned very early on about rejection
A lot
because
of no's.
there's a lot of no's. And I remember hearing Tony Robbins when I was very, very young. I couldn't have been more than 15 or 16 years old. He was just starting out at the time. And I remember him saying that no to him meant next opportunity. And that
Uh, ok-
fundamentally shifted something inside of me. And I never looked at rejection the same. To me, from that day forward, every no that I got just meant next opportunity. And it didn't mean that that door was closed. It just means I was going to have to come back to that door at a later time.
So, Stephen, since you do admit that you were unconventional and your outlook on things, it's safe to say that you were like an outsider. You were different.
Oh, I've always
So
been an
tell me,
outsider.
well, you're doing magic at 10, man. You're different. You're
Yeah.
you're different. Trust me. You're doing magic. Yeah. But tell me how being unique helped you.
The only way it really helped me, to be honest with you, is it developed a thick skin in me that I was going to need much later in life, in a big way, because I was a misfit until I wasn't, and I'll explain that. But my whole early life in school, I was the kid that got beat up every day. I was the kid that got bullied. I was the misfit. I was the one that was eating lunch in the cafeteria by myself because no one else wanted me at their cool kid table, all that kind of stuff. So that was that until I did my first TV appearance. And I remember I was probably about 15 or 16. And I did this TV show and it aired and everyone saw it. And instantly, in a split second, I went from being a misfit and an outcast to being the single most popular kid in the school. And I think that that taught me a very valuable lesson. And the lesson that it taught me was that it's about perception because I knew inside I hadn't changed. I was the exact same person that I was the day before the show had aired. But I think that what it taught me was the lesson of how people perceive you. And when you understand the power of perception, and this comes back to our storytelling, because through storytelling, you're able to craft a narrative that people can relate to. And I now look back and realize that the reason I was an outsider, the reason I was a misfit, is because I was telling the wrong story about me. And I was trying to use my magic tricks as a way to gain friends. And it was actually repelling them. And they looked at me as weird because I was able to do these things that they didn't understand and they couldn't do. And so, if we don't really understand something, we shun it. And I think you see that happening right now with AI. People don't understand AI, so they're shunning it. And I experienced that as a kid. But when I was on that first TV show, it just kind of changed everything because I realized that how people perceive you determines what doors you get to walk through. And
This is true.
when I understood that, everything in my career and my life shifted.
So, let me ask you this. Your life shifted. Lots of times people change how they do things and what they do. They call it reinventing themselves, rebranding themselves. Was there ever a time in your life when reinvention was not optional, but it was absolutely necessary? Kerri, can you comment on that?
Absolutely. Right now, the last 6 years in television have been really, I mean, anyone in the business will tell you it's been really, really challenging. And it wasn't, it's COVID, it was writer strikes, it was actor strikes, it was mergers and acquisitions. More than anything else, the mergers and acquisitions, there are now only going to be 4 studios, and tons of people are losing their jobs. And AI whether they love it or hate it, it will and does already has an impact in the entertainment industry. And
Hmm.
last year, when Steven and I connected, we've known each other for a couple of years because we worked on a TV project together. But he sat down and started explaining to me what he's doing, and I realized the capabilities of AI and his team, and I was like, can we make this work in entertainment, because there's so much here that's never going to happen if we can't do what you're doing. And he said, heck yeah. And I was like, all right, let's go. And that's how that happened. And I feel like now Steven and I and Lumovex, we're on the forefront of where all of entertainment is headed. So and it's extraordinary and wonderful, because it's the first time, well, at least the first time in the last 6 years, where people are paying attention. I'm telling a story and they're listening, versus trying to sell TV shows the traditional way, and people are going, pass, no, she should have brown hair instead of blonde hair, like all those reasons. Now they're like, oh, tell me more. And that excites me. I got to tell you, it's
But
wonderful.
here's my question. When it comes to AI, there's controversy.
Absolutely.
And as Stephen mentioned, people shun what they don't understand. But on top of that, you have another dynamic. You have some people that are fearing that it will interfere with their income. So how do you
Mm.
pitch something like this that affects actors, that affects I can't think of everybody behind the camera, but you got the key grip, the best boy. All I see all this stuff that goes on in the titles of when the credits roll. But this affects all of those people. How do you? That's why I asked about the nose and stuff earlier. So how do you sell that? How does that affect you?
So, and there are two parts to that question, and I think part one is, thank you for allowing us this opportunity to share our thoughts and philosophies on our company and what's happening in the world with AI. But if it's like anything you fear, until you face it, it's going to kill you. So you need to figure out how to face it, how to overcome it, how to harness it, to use it to your advantage. And I think I'm very happy that I was able to do that with Steven's help. And now we can help other people get to that place where they can understand how to use AI in their life. And you know what? Maybe they won't be a best boy anymore, but maybe they'll be a different kind of best boy. Or
Hmm.
maybe you're not going to write in the traditional way, you're going to write in a new way. But I think we all have to figure out this thing and how it's going to work for us.
I'd
I
like to answer
agree.
that as well, if we have the time,
No,
because
we have the time.
I think this is fascinating. Carrie hit the nail on the head, and I think that the piece that everyone's missing. Listen, I've been doing transactions on the internet since day one, literally since the internet was invented. That's how freaking old I am. But anyway, I remember that when the dot com bubble hit, back in the early 90s, everyone said no one will take out their credit card and give it to you over the internet. No one will buy anything online because it's too shady. People are going to steal your card and all of that. Well, we see how that
Hmm.
worked out. Now
Right.
trillions of dollars a day are done in transactions, across the internet. So I think that really what we're talking about here is a transitional period that we are in right now, just like back then, where there's going to be some shakeup for sure. I mean, I have conversations with CEOs every single day in this town. I'm located in Las Vegas. And we have all these casinos here, and I'm very deeply connected into the casino world here. And I get calls all the time from casino executives saying, "Look, the new generation doesn't care. The younger generation doesn't care about gambling. They don't care about nightclubs. They don't care about all of those things. How do we attract them? How do we bring them in?" And it's the same thing, the same answer. It is experience. People are looking for experience, and I think that is a part of what we're doing, is that it's our job to create an experience in the way that we make these new stories. And I think, to your question, the people behind the scenes, they have to understand that the way we tell those stories, the way that we create those experiences has now changed forever. And it's never going back to the way it was. And so
Uh-huh.
I think those people that you're talking about that you see rolling on the credits at the end of the series, I think all of those people need to reinvent themselves, as you were mentioning earlier. And I think that they need to look at ways that they can level up their skill sets so that they continue to be relevant in the path forward. Because the truth
Hmm.
is this, and I know it's kind of hard to hear for some people out there, but life as we know it is over. It is fundamentally changed, and technology has been the catalyst. Much how after World War II, you saw the industrial age, come
Uh-huh.
about in the United States, and all of the manufacturing and all that kind of stuff that we really didn't have prior to that. I think we're experiencing something similar to that right now in the United States. And I think that people, all of this anxiety and stress that they're feeling is a result of the fear that they're allowing to consume themselves. A better strategy, and what I tell people, is don't be afraid of it, learn about it,
Embrace
embrace
it.
it,
Yes.
and figure out how you can take what you do. I don't care if you're a lighting grip or you're a copywriter or you're, assistant director or whatever your skill set is, whoever you are. I
Uh-huh.
recently had a conversation with a production designer, and they were like, well, no one's going to need me anymore because AI can do my job better than I can. That's not true. That's not true. And there's going to be a huge need for those creative people. Can you imagine AI trying to create something in the style of Tim Burton? It might be able to get a facsimile of it, but it's not going to be Tim Burton. And we
Uh-huh.
all know what that looks like. We all
Right.
know that aesthetic. Well, that's because of the humanity that is behind it. So I think people like me, our job is to create ways and technology that will allow us to cohabitate, to use those humans because at Lumovex, Kerri and I have made the conscious business decision to include these people, not to
Excellent.
exclude them. So
Mhm.
we're using technology only for two things. We're using it for speed and we're using it for scale. So we're using it to be able to produce content that normally would take months and months and months to film. We can now do that in a week,
Mhm.
for a fraction of the cost, but we still use directors. We still use, screenwriters. We still use producers, showrunners. All of those people are still involved in our process. They're just the product they're producing is just being
Yes.
produced in a different way.
You make me think about a couple of things. I was watching a documentary. Um, it's on Apple TV, and it's I think his name is Jimmy Iovine. I think he's the head
Oh,
of music, they were talking about the issues that they were facing with technology changing when the Napster guys came on the scene. But
mhm,
he saw what was going on and
mhm.
he got with Jobs and said,
Mhm.
"Hey, we need to put music in a downloadable format. These CDs, all of this stuff, that's a thing of the past." And when you think about that, that's a
That
new
became Apple
opportunity
Music.
for people. Yes, it's an opportunity. Um, one of my last few episodes, I had a professor, Patrick J. Murphy, who's an entrepreneur professor, and I asked him what's the biggest myth that people think the new entrepreneurs may have. And he said they believe that they need to invent something. He said when the gold rush came, you didn't have to be digging for gold. You could be selling axes, you could sell jeans, you could sell stuff to the workers because it brought in, you could open up hotels. That's how Hilton got started, you know? So when people see these things change in technology, this is actually an opportunity. So I agree with you on that.
I'll give you an example of that. So, someone asked me the other day. I have a friend who is an HVAC has a small HVAC business. He goes to your home or goes to your business and he fixes your air condition. And that's his business. He's a trade craftsman. He's been doing it for 20 plus years. He asked me the other day, he said, Stephen, what's going to happen to me and my business? I'm not a
Hmm.
technical person. I don't know AI. I don't know anything about technology. I work with my hands. What what is going to happen to me? And this was my answer to him. I said to him, you are perfectly placed and positioned to take advantage of what is coming. Because one of the most valuable skill sets at his core, he does HVAC. I mean, that's his business. But at his core, he's an electrician.
Hmm.
And I said to him, I said, your skill set as an electrician is going to become one of the highest paid careers you can be in because all of these data centers that they are building for AI are going to require a massive amount of electricians.
That's
And
true.
so he's going to be able to translate what he does now. It may morph into more of a consulting business where he's going in and bringing in his team of electricians. And he will manage that group of electricians who will then go in and help build these data centers and things like that. And I told him, I said, you need to think bigger. You need to think it's not a matter of your skill set not being relevant anymore. It's now a question of how can I use my skill set in a relevant way to continue forward.
Excellent, excellent. Opportunity. That's what it is opportunity. So let me ask this question, uh, Kerri. This is for you because you're the storyteller. And you mentioned that when you realize you could see things from the vantage point of a parent, you start to do your storytelling in that same vantage point. Now, we know that we all experience struggle, pain, things of that nature. That's unpleasant, but they're opportunities. So, how do you take this real emotions that you experience and channel that into your story that's told through AI? When Steven says the souls of some AI characters aren't there, how do you make it real? That's what I'm getting at. How do you make this real and touch the heart? Because that's why people go to the movies.
Yeah. I think we are it is all about the story and telling the story, and that it is generations and generations. So you're either telling the story or you're hearing the story, but that's how we as humans connect through that, and it is touching those emotions. And I think our company is uniquely positioned ourselves, and we set the bar really high to create our characters so that they do have soul and they do have humanity and they do look different than the AI slop that's out there. The best testament, and Stephen loves this because I work with a lot of the studios in town, and we are developing their content, content that's been shelved for a long time, stories that couldn't be told because they were too expensive or they couldn't attach the right actor. And so we've taken those and we're reimagining them. And when we produce our content and I take it back for, a rough cut for the executive to review, and instead of looking at the video and saying, "Oh, it doesn't look like this or it doesn't look like that," or "Why isn't she turning and looking
Hmm.
at that person?" Like the human, there are definitely human things that in the ways that we communicate. A lot of times we just communicate with our faces. You don't say any words. And
Yes.
we've been able to our team has been able to master that and harness those human moments. And it's not easy. And we do a lot of rendering to get it right, but we've gotten it right. so that when I go take those rough cuts to those executives, they don't talk about how the characters look. They go right into the story notes. And we know we've succeeded because their brains have gotten past that not being a human being. In fact, they'll sit there and they'll go, "That's not a human. That's not a that's not a person." And I'm like, "No, it's not a person." So we got gifts, okay?
I see. I see. I want to get into your collaboration, how you guys came about, but I have a question that what your experience, it gets me to wondering, lately, within the last year or two, there have been with the college athletes and the high school athletes, there's been a lot of talk about name, image, and likeness. Now, do you see in your scope of work that, because when you make movies, people, we say it in our community, black people, we talk to each other, we say, oh, Denzel's at the theater this Friday, we're going to support him. My point is that people go to see certain stars, they are a draw. So is there a way that you think NIL will be attached to AI characters, so people will it'll be the face of a movie star that we know, and they'll get paid for, even though it's you know what I'm getting at? I don't know how to articulate it just
I know
right,
what you're
but
saying.
do you think NIL agreements will come into play with making AI movies?
Steven.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. Listen, the the answer is yes, and it's only going to get better. And here's what the Hollywood actors don't understand. So let's take your example of Denzel. So right now, Denzel only gets paid if he's standing on a soundstage in front of a camera. And so he can only do one project at a time because he doesn't have the capacity or the time to
Mm-hmm.
be involved in more than one movie at a time because it requires, singers call. I've worked with, a lot of high profile celebrity singers, and they always say right before the show, I have to get out there and sing for my supper because they're not earning money unless they're on that stage.
Right,
So that's
exactly.
all about to change because when you start talking about name, image, and likeness, we now have the ability to bring Denzel into our studio at Lumovex and scan him, and then we can turn him into an AI clone that we can now license to 5 different projects at the same time. And so his name, image, and likeness will be so one to one. Which in the industry we call it a one-to-one match, where
Mm-hmm.
it is so identical that the audience will not know that it's not Denzel. And so we will be able to, he will own his name, limit, image, and likeness, just like Matthew McConaughey has just done. He's the very first
I
celebrity
saw
that
that.
I'm
I
that
saw
I'm
that.
aware of that has encapsulated all of that in legal protection. And so what what is going to happen in the future is organizations like CAA, which is one of Hollywood's biggest theatrical companies, they represent all of these actors like Denzel and all the top A-list people. They are going to become licensing agencies, and they're going to start licensing the name, image, and likeness for different projects. And so you might have 5 different directors that are interested in Denzel, and they might all come and bring projects. He doesn't have to choose anymore. Now he
Right.
can select all of them, and he can manage the use of his name, image, and likeness and oversee it. And if, he needs to go in for one particular project and change one scene or something, or make it more like Denzel, he can do that, and the AI will take care of the rest. So I think it's beneficial to these people, and I think that it's only going to make them give them the opportunity to make way more money than they've ever made before because now they're not limited by the stages they have to stand on. Does that make sense?
Ag- a- Again, more opportunity.
More
And
opportunity.
I love Denzel, but Denzel's not the same Denzel action wise he was 20 years ago. We all get older, and with AI, he can still do his stuff. I like
I'll give
that.
I'll give you an example. Harrison Ford is in talks right now with George Lucas about how to use a future version of him in, say, for example, I'm making this up, but let's say that they wanted to redo another version of Indiana Jones. Well, do you want the 70-year-old version of Harrison, or do you want the 35, 40-year-old version of Harrison? Do you see what I'm saying? Now
Yes.
he has the control over that. He has the ability to make that decision, which version you get. And he also gets to control how he is seen. And so I think that all of that is the new way of going forward. And I think that it's only going to the people who embrace it early on, I think are going to be the real winners in this game.
Yeah, the real benefactors. So, Kerri, how did you guys end up collaborating?
Well, we were working on I was developing a documentary about Siegfried and Roy a number of years ago. And a friend of mine who was one of the top female magicians in Las Vegas said, "Well, let me introduce you to my friends." And Steven and I met. We worked on that project, and it's still sort of being bandied about, but we stayed in touch. And then, as I said before, we met one day. He started telling me about what he is doing in the world of AI, and I, for me, and where the entertainment business is going, it just clicked, and it just seemed like
Okay.
this is an amazing opportunity because I, like everyone else in this town, have scripts and projects that are, that I spent so much time on, and they're sitting there. They can't go anywhere for one reason or another. And now with AI, it was like an opening. It was, when they say the world is your oyster, I truly believe that because we can do anything. If you think about, you want to do a movie in ancient Rome, in Europe, and you want, a cast of thousands, well, that could be a $400 million movie, but maybe I can do it for $4 million.
Right.
And I couldn't have traveled back in time, but now I can. So it's just amazing what we can create. And anyone who has any kind of creativity, it's opened the doors for everyone. And I think it's also leveled the playing field for a lot of artists and writers and creators who don't have to go through the gatekeepers who hold all the money because they can work with companies like ours to make their visions come true.
Yeah. You
Carrie
almost
hit
had
the nail
me.
on the head. Let me add to that by saying that
Oh, please go
one of the
ahead.
one of the parts of this that excites me the most is just what she said. There are millions of scripts out there that would never see the light of day. And they're great scripts. They're great stories that just are written by some of the most talented script screenwriters. And I mean, these stories would never ever see the light of day. And AI allows those stories opportunity today because we can do it for a fraction of the cost. We're working on a project right now where it's for a screenwriter in Alaska, and he has a story called Blood and Moon, which is a vampire werewolf love story. And in the story, they're rivals at first, and then they develop a romantic relationship along the way. And the interesting thing about this is that I was just thinking the other day as we were going over some of the rough cuts, I was thinking this would cost a fortune because it is set in 3 different time periods. And if you had to produce this in terms of a movie, even doing it on a green screen, it would cost you a fortune to do it. And we're doing it for literally what the catering budget on that film would have been. We're doing it for less than the catering budget. So when you think about that and you factor that into it, you realize that there are so many possibilities and there are so many stories that will get told today that would have never ever seen the light of day because of all the Hollywood gatekeepers that Carrie was just talking about.
So when you talk about getting back to the business aspect of your collaboration partnership, no marriage is perfect, right? Not a marriage at home or marriage in the office. So I'm sure you all have disagreements creatively. Now, this is for those aspiring entrepreneurs out here. What principles do you use to break the tie?
Oh, Kerri, I can't wait for this answer. Go ahead.
Like any good husband, first to me.
Because we already established that she does not hear no.
Happy
Happy
wife,
wife,
happy
happy
life.
life. Not do us. You want to say more?
I think I
You
have
know what? Let me just say this, Stephen, because I love and adore this man so much. And I think what really makes it work is that he's an incredible communicator, and really we discuss everything.
Communication.
You do not make decisions without sharing it, thinking about it, talking it through, and then coming up with a course of action. And so I don't know that, I mean, and I pray this never happens, but we've never like gone toe to toe like that. We've just really talked things through.
So,
It, I also agree with
oh, go ahead, Stephen. I'm sorry.
I just want to add to that. I agree with it, but I think that a part of this is that Carrie and I both share the same passion. And I think that when you can find someone that you can work with where you have more things in common, then it's easy to work through the things that don't. I'll tell you a funny story when we first got together. Carrie and I had only been working together for about a month on this project. And she called me one day really upset because
You see,
I
I'm smiling, Carrie. I think this is going to be good. I can't wait to hear this.
Golden.
she called me one day and she was really upset because I had offended her and I had said some things that probably I shouldn't have said, which is not unusual. But for me, I'm very direct. I'm 57 years old and I'm just at the point in my life where I just don't have time for BS. And I will call you out on your BS in 2 seconds. And I'm just very direct. And so for a lot of people who meet me for the very first time, I'm a little too abrasive and a little too direct. And I think people would wish that I had more nuance. Well, guess what? I don't. And so it took Carrie and I a minute for us to figure out what our love language was. How do we
Uh-huh.
communicate with each other? How do I communicate with her? How does she communicate with me and be on the same frequency? Once we figured that out, we both fell in love with each other because we realized that shared the same goals that I had, and
Uh-huh.
ultimately all we were trying to do was move this project forward.
Right.
And so I think that really the answer to your question is whether it's your wife at home or whatever, your work wife, whatever the case may be. I think that learning how to speak in a way that resonates with the other person is one of the most important skills that you can teach yourself. Just figure out how she communicate or he communicates with you, and then learn to communicate in a way with that person that they're able to digest and understand. And so my brain goes really, really fast, and that's not always a good thing. And sometimes I'm 10 steps ahead, and Carrie's really good at reeling me back in and saying, "Hey, let's scale down and focus on just this one problem." And I love that because
That
it helps keep me focused.
yeah, that's me. That's my ADHD brain. I'm the same way.
But if I just
So basically, to sum it up, Stephen, you defer to Carrie. I understand.
Oh,
Okay.
well, happy wife.
He's a smart man. No, but if I
So
just
Carrie, I got
yeah,
go ahead, Carrie. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, what I appreciate about Steven is that he is a big global thinker. Like he's forward thinking all the time. And then I think I get into the granular, like the producer in me is like, okay, how do we make that dream come true?
Right.
And I think that's and I think we also listen to each other. And if nothing else, to share with your community is that everyone needs to have really good listening skills, like verbal and nonverbal listening skills, and you will learn a lot about your partner, your client, your customer. That is a gift. And it's like really focus. Like, don't
Right.
think about what you're going to say next. Really listen to the person you're talking to, and that'll get you miles ahead in business.
That is the best
S-
advice ever.
Yeah, that's good advice. So when it comes to story telling, this is a question for you, Kerri. What part of storytelling must remain stubbornly human, no matter how powerful the tools become?
It is, I think, what we at Lumovex have mastered, which is the emotion, uh, and creating stories that you understand through a creative human connection. So even though they are machine created, we still give them humanity, and you understand whatever their pain point or whatever their joy is in the storytelling.
So my next question is about old Hollywood. I think I know what the answer is going to be because you've hinted at it, Steven. What part of the old entertainment system most deserves to be disrupted?
Oh, it's the studio green light
The
process.
gatekeepers?
The gatekeepers for sure. And I think people, some of your audience may have heard the story of Markiplier on YouTube. This is a young guy who was a filmmaker. He had been in the horror genre, making horror movies, independent films, all of his life. He's a young guy. He's in his 30s, and he was so frustrated that no one would pay attention to him in the process of making his films, and he just kept getting no, 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 and he stopped one day and just started thinking, Why can't I do this myself?" So he crowdsourced the funding. He raised $3 million on his own through friends, family, and anyone who would donate online. He took that movie and over that money, and over a 2-year period, he made his own film at Hollywood quality. He distributed his own film. He made his own deals. And the last I heard, that $3 million film had grossed over $70 million.
That's
And
remarkable.
all of that is his because he's sharing it. He's got a profit pool that he's sharing it with all the people that helped him make the film. But that money is his because he did it without a studio. And I believe that what he actually did, if you remember, no one could outbeat the 4-minute mile until someone ran the 4-minute mile. And then
Right.
because we all thought it was
And
impossible
and then about
humanly,
a month later, somebody broke that.
somebody broke that.
Bannister.
And what was the difference? The difference was the mindset. And I think that what Markiplier showed and demonstrated in the fact that he was able to raise his own money, produce his own film, and distribute it all on his own without any studio help, without any big financing behind him. I think he proved that you can run the 4-minute mile. And I think that now everyone realizes they don't need a big studio anymore to make their dreams come true. They can do this themselves. And I think that the old way of doing things in Hollywood, the gatekeeping, and the same thing's going to happen in the music industry too. I have a long history in the music industry, having worked with, the top artists out there. And I can tell you that the music industry is in the same spot that the Hollywood industry. Hollywood has already collapsed, but the music industry hasn't quite collapsed yet, but it's coming. And for the same reasons.
But
And
they're
you're gonna
talking about it. The singers are discussing it. It's in discussion. Yeah.
they have to. They have to because it just simply doesn't work for anybody but the label owners. And so the same thing was true in Hollywood. It only worked for the studios, and it was squeezing everybody else out, and the studios were just giving everybody else just enough to keep them interested and make them want to do it, but they were taking the lion's share. Those days are over. And I think that now all of these young independent minds who have these incredible stories that need to be told, I think now they see the path forward and they realize I don't need a studio. I don't need, tens of millions of dollars to shoot my film. I might be able to do it with 500,000. and get it out there and make it. I mean, we all remember Blair Witch. I think that they made that movie with something like 300,000,
A camcorder.
right, and
Yeah.
a camcorder, and it became this phenomenon that made hundreds of millions of dollars. That's going to be the story that happens more and more and more often
But
because
here's
now
the
people aren't afraid anymore. It was the fear that the studios created that kept everyone from doing it because you were convinced that you needed it. And I
but
think
here's
that
the question though, Stephen. I agree with you. The gatekeepers won't be controlling as much, but when it comes to AI, you have a lot of creative freedom. And what's the thing? Let's say power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
absolutely.
Where do you, with Lumovex, where do you draw the line when it comes to the ethical line, when it comes to likeness, when it comes to consent, when it comes to authorship, when it comes to truth? Because you all have a lot of power in your hands that you can do. So is there an ethical line that exists?
For sure there is. And I think that you already answered your own question. It's consent. We have to have the consent of the person that we're working with or we're duplicating or whatever the case may be. And I think that without that consent, it's not ethical to move forward. So that's why we embrace the humanity. That's why we embrace the people behind the camera. That's why we embrace, all of the people that need to be involved in these projects are involved in these projects to the extent that the need arises because I don't believe that you're going to be able to do something with a big star unless that person is intimately involved in that kind of a process. Just the other day, Carrie and I had a conference with one of the top lawyers in the Hollywood industry. And that's the topic. That's what we were talking about is how do we produce legislation that protects this? How do we get the insurance companies involved in a way that is ethical and protects this? So we're having those conversations with lawmakers, with people that are out there affecting the future of how these films will be made. And I think that those conversations are important and they need to happen more often. And the ethics are something that we're in kind of a bit of the Wild West right now and
Mm-hmm.
anything goes, and we saw that back in the beginning when the internet first happened and everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, internet porn," and today it's like, you can't have the internet without porn. And so I really feel like
I
that's
don't know
kind
if that was the best example,
but,
Stephen,
but
but I understand
maybe
what you're
not,
saying.
but
but
you know
but
what I
Stephen,
say.
I know what you're saying, but what you saying is so true when it comes to known stars. But I've seen things on social media that there wasn't a known star, but it looked real. Come to find out, it wasn't. So where do you draw the line with that? Because you could go just make something right now, and people think it's real, but the story that you tell may not be. So are there things? Are there
So
any?
I think
Is
what
that a
you're
part of the discussion that's happening?
I think what you're asking me, it could be answered like this. The truth is we don't know right now. We
Okay.
don't have all of this figured out. We're trying,
Okay.
Carrie and I kind of look at ourselves as pioneers in the sense that we are helping to develop a lot of
Definitely.
these strategies and kind of things like this. And we're forging this path for the very first time. No one has all the answers. We've spoken to some of the most educated lawyers on the planet about this topic, and they don't even have all the answers. And so we're kind of making it up as we go along. And I think that as we work through those issues, you're going to see a lot of bad actors. There are going to be
Mhm.
people who are going to take Tom Cruise's image and they're going to make deep fakes and all kinds of that's going to happen. And
Okay.
I think that the reason people would come to a company like Lumovex is because we're not going to cross that line.
Excellent. Excellent. So when people look back on this era 10 years from now, what do you hope they say you understood early that other people didn't?
I personally hope they say that we weren't afraid at all, and that we forged a path with blind ignorance, and we just kept going. Because I think right now we're in the stage where everything is a valid idea, and we need to just figure out which ideas are the ones that are going to benefit people the most. And it's just a process of working through them, figuring it out, trying something, see if it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. If it does, you keep the parts of it that work, and maybe the rest of it needs to be revamped. We're kind of in that trajectory right now.
They call that OJT, on the job training.
Absolutely. And that's where we are. And anyone, by the way, and I say this every day now, anyone who tells you that they know, right away, as soon as you hear that, they're full of BS.
Yes.
Because no one knows right now. No, I hear Sam Altman, who is the owner of AI, of OpenAI. I hear him all the time say things that I know are complete BS, but he's saying it from a shareholder perspective.
Mhm.
So I look at him and I laugh. He's laughable to me, because I just look at him and I go, what are you talking about? We don't have this figured out. Even at the highest levels, we don't have it figured out. No one does. And we're all on the same path. We're just at different degrees of having traveled that path. And I
Mhm.
think that it's going to take some time, just like it took credit card processing over the internet. It took years to figure that out. And I think that we're in the same phase. It's going to take years for us to be fit to figure out all of the guardrails that we need for AI.
That's it took years to figure out how to. The internet really disrupted so many industries, the book industry, the music industry, and it took years for them to figure out how are we going to do this and make it profitable and a win-win for everybody. So I definitely agree with you. Kerri, can you finish this sentence for me? The future of storytelling will only be worth it if.
If humans continue to tell them.
Okay. Steven, you agree with that? You
That was-
see?
I can't
See,
top that
he's the
answer.
perfect partner. He acquiesces.
I can't I
He
can't
is a
top that.
smart
That's the
man.
greatest answer ever.
Yeah.
Kerri, Steven, thank you both for being here. This was a wonderful conversation about innovation, storytelling, and reinvention, and what it means to stay human in a rapidly changing world. I appreciate your insight. I appreciate your honesty and the work that you're both doing at the intersection of creativity and technology. It is much needed and much appreciated. And to everyone listening out there, thank you for joining us here on Ingleside Reviews Innovators Unveiled. Available on Braveheart TV, on Roku, on Amazon Fire TV, on YouTube, and on all podcast platforms. Keep innovating, keep creating, and never stop unveiling the innovator in you. I'm your host, A.D. Edwards, signing off.
This has been Ingleside Reviews, Innovators Unveiled, hosted by A.D. Edwards. For more conversations with innovators and business professionals, follow the show on your favorite podcast app, subscribe on YouTube, watch on the Bravehearts TV network, and visit innovatorsunveiled.com to learn more about the show and upcoming guests.